And so let's say you're in a boardroom, you're an advisor.
I don't want to talk to the boardroom. I want to talk to the U.S. government, right? And so, like, for me, actually, the biggest aha of DeepSeek is nothing we've talked about right now. The biggest aha of DeepSeek is how blind our policies have been around AI. Right? They've been so wrong-headed. So our previous policies around AI have been, we can't open source because it'll enable China. We've got to limit our big labs, we've got to put all of this regulation on top of it. And the reason is for safety and all this other stuff.
Export controls.
All the export controls, so we can't enable other countries. We put export controls on chips. We've talked about putting export controls on software, like weight limits, all of this other stuff. Like, that was our entire policy. And for me, the biggest takeaway, the whole DeepSeek thing is that's the wrong way to do policy. China has got a lot of very smart people. They're incredibly capable. They're great researchers. They can build stuff as great as well as we can, and they can open source it. We did not enable them. They did this even with export controls on chips, right? So there's basically all of our activity has been for naught. And what we should be doing is funding and investing in our research labs, and we should be going as fast as we can. And it really is the AI race, just like we went through the space race, and we need to win. And we have everything that we need to win. The only thing in our way is our own regulatory.
And just to build on that, like, the lesson is not Sputnik, the lesson is the internet. And because what we learned from the internet, which, Al Gore famously claimed to have invented the internet, but what he really did was invent the regulation that allowed the internet to flourish.
Yes.
And it could have been, they could have looked at the internet and said, oh my God, this is a Sputnik moment, and then tried to turn it into what AT&T and WorldCom wanted. And they were there lobbying, trying to make that happen. Exactly. Like, they absolutely, and frankly, AOL wanted it to happen that way too. And so they ignored that, and they went with what made the internet strong to begin with. And so what gave us this DeepSeek moment was the strength of the worldwide technology community. And so as much as people want to own it, and be the singular provider, it's not going to work. The biggest difference, not to overanalyze the analogy, I think it's a Sputnik moment in the sense that it's a wake-up call for half the world. It isn't a geopolitical wake-up call. It's not about war. It's literally just about technology diffusion. And we've had so many misfires since then. I mean, we had the whole encryption war where we tried to put export controls on encryption and all this. And, although people thought we were being silly as an industry when many of us would champion this, well, you can't. It's like outlawing math. It turns out it is outlawing math. And the fact that it used those chips, well, the world's economy, as we've seen, is very, very hard to put export controls on things.
Remember when we were going to export control PlayStations?
Oh, yeah. It was Xbox, like, the government came to, or like, actually 2048-bit encryption in email.
Yes.
Because people came to them, well, we can't have, bad actors, that's their favorite phrase, bad actors encrypting their email. I'm like, well, they're just going to encrypt the attachment themselves, and then there's nothing we can do about that.
For sure. But in this case, we've actually put export controls on GPUs before. I mean, a perfect analog. We were like, oh, listen, you can do weapon simulation on these things. Like, a PlayStation was the first to actually use the SGI.
Right.
Remember that. We're going to export control that. Like, we can't let that into, like, Saddam Hussein's hands. Like, the whole thing. Total failure, because it just turns out global markets are global markets. And, like, we're much, much better in investing, which at the time we did in our own infrastructure. We did a great job of that. And I think it was great analogy with the internet and with Al Gore. We should be doing exactly that again. And some politician needs to stand up and be the Al Gore of this moment.
And I think that we will get that. So I do think that there is now a wake-up call. Like, I think that the futility of the past 4 or 5 years of this kind of stuff is now very, very clear. And I mean that even more broadly than you were saying. Like, I mean, like, the people who wanted to control this technology at this very granular level in all these think tanks and institutes that were all aligned. I mean, the number of books written, the number of academic departments started, the number of assaults on technology companies to align. I mean, the whole meetings in Switzerland about aligning, with the world leaders, like, we should, that's just not how anything evolves. And if the biggest lesson for computing starting in 1981 with the IBM PC, or frankly, 1977 with the Apple, has been the creativity at the edge, and it just enabling that. And I think the problem that the regulators had was they had never faced regulating a connected world before. The other lesson from DeepSeek is just, okay, the world is already connected. The world is already native in all of this stuff. So now the amount of actual calendar time it takes for something to diffuse technically is zero. DeepSeek, I think, was the number I saw this morning is like 35% of the DAUs of OpenAI, and that's a giant spike because just all the same people are just trying it out because there's no friction, it takes no time, and so it's so unbelievably exciting to be part of what's going on right now, and we just don't need to like throw water on it and be party poopers.